Buongiorno, ladies and gentlemen. I've just used all of my Italian. Welcome back to It Ain't Broke. In the next one of our Italian horror specials, I'm joined again by Duncan Rule.
Hello.
We're going to talk today about Lucio Fulci's film A Cat in the Brain.
Yes, more Fulci. More Fulci fun than fright.
I think we've got a kind of limited pool of creators in these 4 episodes, but I think they're choice picks.
Yeah.
So would you care to explain A Cat in the Brain?
Yes. Okay, so this movie I believe came out in 1990, so it's a really late Fulci effort. It's a really weird film. It's probably the weirdest thing I think he's put out. Basically, the best way to describe it, I suppose, and I've seen it described as this, is it's Fulci's version of like 8½.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's a movie about him making movies, but with just a ridiculous horror twist on it. So the plot essentially is that Fulci plays himself. He's the main star of the film. And he's in the process of shooting some, yet another really gory movie. But he finds himself having, terrifying visions of horrible shit happening and starts to think that he's going insane. And then just the entire movie plays out as basically a kind of best of, where almost none of the gore in this film is actually stuff that they shot for it. It's all taken cold from other latter-day Fulci movies. Like I think they used Sodomer's Ghost and Touch of Death is one that crops up quite a lot, and quite a lot of other films. I think there were some films which his name was attached to, but he didn't actually direct. And
so you referred in the last video to that third era.
Yeah,
of his career.
Is very much. This is pure third era Fulci, just absolute bollocks. And yeah, it kind of plays out like, I think you described it as like a sitcom sort of clip show, which is basically what it is.
It's like Fulci stuck in a lift with Uncle Phil, and they talk about all the funniest things that happened in the last season.
But instead of going, oh, remember when that happened? It's just cut in like, hey, this is part of this movie. Which is sort of a very weird effect. It's a very odd film to watch.
Was it his last film?
I don't know.
Sorry, everyone.
I thought
we should have checked.
I should have checked that. I
feel
part
like
of me
it
thinks
is.
it is, but then part of me thinks.
So I take advantage of really sarcastic on-screen graphics for these kind of things.
I think he died in like '96 or something.
Okay.
So there may be stuff, I can't remember, there may be stuff after this, but it's definitely one of his last efforts, and it's really half-assed.
It's a profoundly odd film.
It is.
It's a very strange film because if author inserts are a difficult thing to do. And I know seemingly Stephen King did that in the Dark Tower books.
Right, yeah.
And like you said, it's kind of like 8½. And,
that's being very generous.
Yeah, but conceptually.
Conceptually, yeah.
The other thing is, they just released Orson Welles' last film in a work print version, The Other Side of the Wind, on Netflix. There's a documentary about it, which is essentially about, he says it wasn't, but it's kind of an Orson Welles surrogate.
Yeah.
And like Peter Bogdanovich and stuff like that. So it's kind of, you can compare it to that, I suppose. Comparing Fulci's Orson Welles. Yeah, well, who was in Transformers the movie? It wasn't Fulci, was it? So, fuck you. So just a little bit of sirens there, like normal. That's what people love about this show. Yeah. It's this kind of strange thing where Fulci goes through his career and
only
kind
like
of
the arse end of his career.
Well, yeah. That's the thing, because it features, there's some music from the Beyond.
Yeah, that's the only reference to like classic era Fulci is a bit of music from the Beyond, which crops up multiple times in this. I don't know if maybe there was some sort of rights thing where he couldn't use stuff from his more well-regarded
kind of golden
films.
age.
So yeah, as I said, most of the clips are from just his sort of late shit. I mean, Touch of Death is one that crops up a few times in this. So the head in the microwave is from Touch of Death, which is one of the best bits in this entire thing. And the bloke sort of slapping this woman about while she's like singing at him. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah.
That's all taken from Touch of Death. So yeah, it's kind of films that came out only sort of slightly before he actually did this, and he just recycled the clips. I guess maybe he thought no one watched them. So
well, it's funny, is it? Because it's an odd choice. I mean, again, I think like Fulci is an auteur. Like, and it sounds highfalutin and pretentious, but auteur doesn't necessarily mean that you're particularly good, or at least there are tropes and stuff. And to choose to do this thing where you enter your own films, because things like Hollywood examples would be not necessarily entering your own films, but a similar technique would be like Terminator Genesis or Back to the Future, you know, where you slavishly recreate things. Where this is mostly reused footage, so it's like a greatest hits album.
And it's a very weird thing because, like I say, he plays the main character, but he's a terrible actor.
He is a terrible actor.
Most of the film is just him kind of bumbling around by himself, like in this kind of lumberjack jacket that he's got.
Yeah,
just looking at things, and then stuff. But one of the most frustrating things about this entire film, and I realised it more so when I rewatched it for this, is that he's never in the same frame as what he's looking at or what's going on.
Yeah, it's really obvious.
It's really horrible to watch after a while because you just want to see something tangible happening, and all it is like his face going, and then you see something horrible happening, and then it cuts back to where he is, and the background never matches up with where he actually is. So it's really disjointed. It's like he's looking at a telly, just watching a little.
It really is, yeah, because it's not even as if something like, you know, Terminator Genesis, obviously, not a fan, and there are big glaring things in it where actors look completely different and stuff.
Yeah.
However, there's some really slavishly recreated stuff in it. I mean, like, you know, one-to-one matchups. And Back to the Future was, you know, Back to the Future wasn't even recreating things so much as literally inserting them in through rotoscoping and blue screen and blah, 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 and motion control and whatnot.
Yeah.
Whereas this, because a really good example of what you've just described is the scene where Fulci goes to the restaurant. And the entire scene is Fulci goes, sits down in a restaurant, and the man goes, Mr. Fulci, your usual table? Would you like the really bloody steak or the steak tartare?
He's like, ta-ta. No, not ta-ta. and then he just freaks out.
And then he gets up and leaves. And that's the whole scene.
That's the thing, yeah. Basically, a man orders him some raw meat, and then he doesn't want it because it reminds him of, like, gore.
Right,
and then he goes home.
What he done.
He goes home and has a nap in the middle of the day when he's meant to be directing a film. So this is the thing. When you watch that back, right, he says, I'm going out for lunch. Do you want to come? To the producer or whatever. He's like, no. Goes off to the restaurant, doesn't like the meat, goes all the way home, gets into bed, and then like goes mental at a guy sawing a piece of wood outside, and then like turns up to reshoot his film like hours later.
The insert scenes are so weird, and I understand that. I saw a percentage somewhere, and like the actual amount of new material is really small.
It is. That chainsaw thing is, but again, even the stuff that's shot for the film, he's never. Like, there's no interaction between him and anybody else. So you kind of see this guy covered in red paint for some reason, going like this with a chainsaw, and then it sort of zooms in and out like an old kung fu movie, and then he just kind of gets a bit pissed off and smashes up some red tins of paint with an axe. But there's no, you never see him in this bloke, and it happens throughout. So even the stuff that they shot for the film, he's never interacting with anything apart from a couple of scenes like the restaurant. Like there's a bit where they've got this sort of, I think it's these producers or somebody who's got a stake in this movie he's filming over from Germany. It was like
a stake.
A television crew.
Sorry.
and he's talking to them in this room, and then he starts picturing something horrible that he shot. Or I think it's like this extended orgy scene from Sodom's Ghost, which is a kind of weird Nazi thing that he did. And then he supposedly goes mental and like attacks the camera crew and starts trying to strip this woman's clothes off. You don't see any of that happen. He just gets told it. Someone pulls him out of the room and says, "You've just done this. Now go back in and apologise." And then he goes in and the woman's like, "Oh, don't worry, it's all right." It's really weird. And that was shot for the film, and it's still like you don't see anything happen.
Nothing
happens. A lot of stuff just happens off camera.
Is that a stylistic choice though, do you think?
I think they just couldn't be
because
I think Fulci
love that. There's no quarter given, it's just like, nah, fuck him.
Yeah, I think Fulci couldn't be bothered. Because I think at this point he was suffering quite a lot with his health. So he probably just wasn't physically capable of like beating up a cameraman. So they just had someone go, "You just beat up a cameraman."
Well, look, to give it its due, I mean, again, like from a kind of practical sense, technical sense, it's very just kind of like the fuck.
Yeah.
But it's a man who it would seem felt was at the end of his life.
Yeah.
Decided to kind of go back and review his career and what it meant. And I think I feel like, because the point is he goes to see a psychiatrist.
Yeah, let's get on to the psychiatrist in a minute. But.
Right. He goes to see a psychiatrist, so it's this classic kind of thing of like, looking inside your own head.
Yeah.
And the key thing of the film seems to be that he feels what he's done is immoral.
Yeah.
And like, you know, making gory movies was a bad idea, and it's, you know, but then again, the film is just giving you a best of collection of all that.
And I think ultimately he decides it was all right, because the only reason he's worried about it is because he then starts to think he's acting things out. So he goes to see this psychiatrist, Dr. Egon Schwartz, whose name's spelt wrong on the plaque on his door. It's like Schwarz or something. And then tells him about all these problems he's having. And then it appears like the psychiatrist hypnotises him in order to get Fulci to carry out crimes by playing him this noise, which hardly ever comes up. Or maybe is it that he gets him to carry them out, or makes him think that he's carrying them out, so that the psychiatrist can go on a rampage and kill a load of people in ridiculous outfits.
Including,
so there's one scene where I think the first time you see him murder someone, he's basically wearing like a cagoule his mum's bought him. Like all of his killing outfits look like
it's got
something
his
an
name
8-year-old.
written in the
Yeah. It looks like something an 8-year-old boy would be made to wear by their mum. So the first one, he's got his anorak on, and it's like tight around his face. Like that. It's like done up as tight as possible. He's got little red woolly gloves on.
Which I hope are on bits of string.
They must be on bits of string.
Going through his sleeves.
And then he kills this woman who, again, seems spectacularly flimsy. Like, he just swings a hatchet and her entire hand comes off in one blow.
People in Italian horror are just kind of big bags of blood.
Yeah, there's never any attention paid to like realism in terms of like. He chops her head off in about 2 strokes with this tiny little blunt axe.
So you mentioned Argento earlier.
Yeah.
And it really is it's the other end of the spectrum from Argento.
Absolutely.
Because
this is why Fulci never gets up there with Argento in terms of reputation.
Okay, in terms of artistry, because like, you know, a lot said about the giallo lighting schemes and stuff, and it's lots of coloured gels and things. And the way Argento uses that, I mean, because it's super, super gaudy, which by design, and he does, like, particularly in Suspiria, like some really amazing scenes of like, and it's in terms of separating background and foreground and stuff like that. Whereas Fulci's lighting is a bit more like this.
Yeah,
it's just two gels.
In particular, I'd say looks like an old episode of Neighbours. Like it looks like
everybody needs good neighbours.
It looks like a soap opera. It's very televisual looking.
The insert scenes are just completely flat lighting, straight edits, and you know, often the music's just borrowed from the other movies.
Yeah, or there's just this weird sound effect of people going like, that keeps getting played over the top of. I don't know what that's supposed to add. But
first time I watched this, I did really like it.
I mean, I love it. Don't get me wrong; it's absolute shit, but that's why it's good.
I would challenge you to name many other things like it. I mean, in terms, the thing is, I think there's a lot of stigma involved to doing such a clear kind of author insert thing, particularly when the character's named after yourself, because I think it's viewed as being kind of egotistical and a bit narcissistic, which I can't really argue with too
named
much.
After himself. He's referred to this as Mr. Fulci at some point, and other points Dr. Fulci. And in fact, has a brass plaque on his own front door which is Dr. Lucio Fulci.
We know Takeshi Kitano is either Takeshi Kitano or Beat Takeshi, because Beat Takeshi's like his kind of... Because, like, you know, Takeshi Kitano was basically the Japanese Noel Edmonds before, you know... so that's quite interesting, that kind of delineation.
But he gets referred to as both things in the same movie. And as far as I know, he wasn't a doctor or anything. I don't really know what to do with that.
Well, Takeshi did that from the Two Beats, where there's... Or the two... Oh, no, it's just called Takeshi's. The Two Beats was his old act. It's just called Takeshi's, where he delineates the types of Takeshi. So I suppose, if you wanted to compare it, like Takeshi Kitano's kind of done that, I guess. But there's not much else like it. And Takeshi Kitano is clearly some kind of dark psychopath, which is why I love him. But... yeah, you know, I don't think there's a lot of stuff you could compare it to, and it's really fucking interesting. Okay, technically it's not done very well, and a lot of the inserts are just Fulci bumbles around.
That's most of the movies him bumbling around between murders, or imaginary murders.
Well, if you were, you know, in terms of directors acting, or at least appearing, and these are obvious big hitters, like Orson Welles was an actor-director, right? And he just effortlessly charismatic and just appeared in a bunch of stuff. So if Orson Welles, and like in F for Fake, you know, Orson Welles is on screen a lot and he's essentially presenting it. Like, he's great, he's Orson fucking Welles. Steven Spielberg does wacky cameos and things, and he's kind of all right, you know? Like, he's decent enough as a screen presence. And there are lots of actors, you know, people like Affleck and stuff that have turned to directing and whatever. Fulci is not an actor, and it seems to come out of nowhere that he just foregrounds himself like
this. It could
this.
be worse. But I mean, I think he does have cameos in some of his movies. So I think Zombie Flesh Eaters 1, he's like Ian McCulloch's boss in like one scene.
Right.
And he appears in a couple of other ones, but it's literally for like 2 seconds.
Like Romero's in the very beginning of Dawn of the Dead.
Yeah,
you
but
know.
in terms of like a full, this is the only time he did it. And
Wow, Jesus,
in
as
a
well.
way, it kind of makes the film because it just wouldn't be anywhere near as funny if it wasn't him just sort of trudging around, you know.
It's fucking
while
depressing,
weird
isn't it?
shit
As well,
happens.
particularly we know that he was sort of at the end of his life, and he just sort of bumbles from scene to
That
scene,
is
gets
literally
told
the
he's
movie.
done stuff.
Apart from these bits with this psychiatrist, you know, who just crops up occasionally and does a murder. But unfortunately seems to be there when the murder goes on. That's another thing. So there's the second time he kills someone, I think. He's wearing an outfit from his mum. He's got a little red bobble hat on and a scarf that matches it, right? And he kills this woman in the woods. And Fulci's just there, and he sees it happen,
Well,
and
yeah,
he drops his cigarette lighter on the floor.
I think that's supposed to play into the ambiguity of whether or not he did it and whatever.
But why is he in the middle of the woods in the night? Like, there's no...
Well, yeah, that's true. Because again, he just arrives at places and watches
Yeah.
stuff happen.
And watches it. You only ever see him. You never see...
I mean, I suppose, and again, you know, I don't want to be too highfalutin, but I suppose it's kind of like Vertigo or something like that, where you've been driven insane.
Yeah.
It's the idea that you've been driven mad by some traumatic event, and then
Yeah.
you're kind of not sure what you're seeing.
True.
And Don't Look Now, for example, is something
Yeah.
of kind of having illusions of a thing you haven't seen. Because I'm determined to dig into the fact that it is an interesting film.
Yeah, sorry.
It's
I mean,
just,
it is.
It is. I mean, and I quite enjoyed it the first time I saw it, and it is a look into someone's mind, for better or for worse.
Yeah, literally at the beginning. It was a
Well, and that's the
shot.
problem. It's so fucking on the nose. I mean, Jesus Christ. Yeah, we get
At the
it.
start of the film, he's just sat there writing down ideas for like gross stuff he might do, like but with no context, just writing down like
Fulci's
ways to
gross
kill
stuff.
people for next film, and he just writes them down with no sort
By
of.
Lucio Fulci, 63 3/4.
So yeah, I guess ranking this film in terms of like a Fulci extravaganza, it's kind of
Fulci extravaganza.
It's kind of hard to place it because on the one hand it is terrible and it's very much latter day Fulci, but I really like it, and I do, despite I've been sitting here slagging it off, but
I got to say,
I've
we
watched
have
it
been
loads of
really
times.
negative, but yeah,
I
it
always
is.
come back to it.
I would definitely recommend it. I mean, it is worth watching, and I do think it is a completely unique perspective on someone's
And
career.
almost actually, if you can't be bothered to watch any other sort of late 80s Fulci, you could just might as well just watch this. 'Cause you just see all the best gore bits.
It's the best of album, isn't it?
Exactly.
It really is. It's such a weird thing for a director to do. Because again, imagine if like Spielberg did this, and it's just he walks you through the best scenes.
Yeah,
of
he
his
looks
films.
at a dinosaur that's charging at him, and then
He's standing on a just plain white background, and he goes,
yeah, and then you see like a T-Rex person. out of it.
and goes to a zoo, looks at a lizard, and it reminds him of dinosaurs, so he leaves. Looks at a pepperami, thinks of ET, and then leaves, bumbles around.
Yeah.
I tell you what would probably be an equivalency, and I'm not being glib about this, but like, I can't imagine George Lucas acting.
Yeah.
Right? And this isn't just a dig at him, but he's not a very personable, charismatic person. I'm not
Yeah.
saying he's a bad guy, but he's not got a presence. So if you had this kind of strange thing of George Lucas bumbling around and like walking through scenes from American Graffiti and shit like that, and THX, like it'd probably be like that.
Yeah,
Kind of slightly weird, off kilter, you know.
Yeah, should we put a suggestion into him maybe to have a go at himself?
Well, he's got 4 billion
A
fucking quid.
lightsaber in the brain.
A lightsaber in the brain, a tauntaun in the brain.
I think one of the other things I really enjoy about this is there's just some hilarious dialogue in it and just things that don't make any sense. Like there's this whole thing where he's trying to get in touch with this policeman who's a friend of his because he wants to kind of say, I'm not doing these killings because it keeps getting reported on the news or something. And he goes to his house, he goes to this bloke's house, wanders round, he sees loads of people being killed in what's an empty house, and then kind of goes outside, and then the guy turns up and he's like, I've just seen your whole family murdered. And he's like, no you haven't, let's go inside and have a cuppa. And then
To be fair, I did say that to you when you got here today, didn't I?
Yeah, but I
Duncan,
knew it
I've
was
just seen
true.
your family
I
murdered.
wasn't fazed by it at all because I knew it was a joke.
Walked in. So I read somewhere that initially the concept for this when he pitched it was a 40-page kind of not really even a screenplay.
Right.
And it was all of the linking devices for the films, and there was no dialogue. No dialogue. It was just a list of effects and the sound effects they would make. Now I can't verify that because I read it on the internet, and that's hardly the biggest
you could
font of
believe that
knowledge.
watching it though.
I could, yeah. I mean, if the linking devices initially were just kind of loads of squelches and squashes and stuff like that,
Exactly, and there is very little dialogue in the film, like, because, you know, as we mentioned, most of it is just him wandering around. Occasionally he'll interact, like, with the producer guy or his psychiatrist or his receptionist, sorry, who has this really weird, he's got this receptionist who has this really weird little part where she's going, oh, it's that famous film director coming into your phone. And maybe he'll give us a part in his new film.
God, yeah.
And then he doesn't talk to her. And he leaves, and she calls him a little shit. Which I thought was really funny. It's just such a weird way to describe, like, a kind of...
It definitely, I would say, you know, because he arrives at the conclusion that maybe what he's doing isn't so bad.
Yeah.
But it definitely shows a not great amount of self-esteem. I mean, I'll give it that. It's very self-effacing.
Yeah.
Because he kind of doesn't cast a great view of himself.
No, absolutely not.
You know, you've got to give him that, really. Like, because again, I think the danger is, because I remember hearing about Stephen King, like, apparently turns up in the Dark Tower. I've not read it, so please. And Carter Grove's like, yes, I'm Stephen King! And I just remember thinking, like, dude, man, come on, you've just turned into Garth Marenghi.
Yeah,
now.
he definitely doesn't blow his own trumpet too much in this. Like, I think that's the one time someone refers to him as, like, the famous film director.
Yeah, and then immediately they turn it on a dime and call him a little shit.
Yeah, exactly. So there's none of that. And then there's kind of this girl in a wheelchair who lives near him who sort of knows who he is. But he never comes across as, like, a...
Well, he's generally shown as like this easily manipulated dupe, though, isn't he?
He, is,
like,
he doesn't seem to have a lot of... He's just kind of just going through the motions and being controlled by this guy.
I tell you what it's like. It's like American Splendor. He's like this schlubby Harvey P car. Just like if you were to remake this and tell me it's going to be played by Paul Giamatti, I'd be like, yeah. Like, so he's just this sort of schlubby schnook.
Yeah, yeah. And I think even by the end of the movie, it's never made clear what he did, if anything, what the psychiatrist did, and what he, you know, which bits of what he saw was real. It seems like, thinking back on it, all that actually happens is 2 people get murdered by the psychiatrist. But other than that, it's just a bunch of...
It feels like the purpose of this film is for Fulci to work through some shit.
Yeah.
And again, it's not even like he does it via the medium of his best films. It's like, it's kind of a bit like when you go to see your favourite band and they're only playing the new stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
And they've got one good one at the end.
It's like, if at the end of the film he went into the beyond. You know.
But only the audio.
Well, he pretended to walk off, rolled the credits, and then come back on.
And the ending of it is weird, actually. Yeah, he just kind of... He's filming a scene on this boat for the film, where you think he's killed this girl, but then he hasn't, and then she goes off with him. In fact, I think it might be the receptionist.
Little shit.
We'll
little
check
shit.
that, but I'm pretty sure it is the word. By this point, she's fine because she's in the movie. He's no longer a little shit, and then she buggers off with him on holiday. And it's just a very weird ending. And he seems totally fine with the whole thing by then. Like the psychiatrist's been arrested, or is he killed? I can't even bloody remember now. The psychiatrist is out of the picture anyway. And then he seems to be fine then, despite the fact he was having all these issues before he even went to see him at the beginning.
Well, it's very clearly a man...
He's just like, I just needed a holiday.
The point of the film is a man working through some stuff.
Yeah.
You know, working through his own career. And I don't know... I can't imagine he got like some massive payday from this. Or maybe he did, and that's the scam.
I mean, it must have cost about 50 quid to make, though.
Well, it's a really minimal crew, and all the kind of insert stuff technically isn't that interesting. Yeah. And then there's loads of him reacting to shit. I mean,
most of the shots in this are his face, like,
yeah,
or it's stock footage. That's kind of it, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I can't imagine much money was made. I can't imagine this being shown in a cinema either. It's just like who would pay money to get a ticket to go and see
that
it?
Would be kind of weird. Another kind of really left field example to compare it to is and now for something completely different, you know, the Monty Python film, where they just go and redid everything on 60mm film so they could show it in a cinema, and it's like, you know, great, cheers guys, thanks very much. Well, there you go. There's A Cat in the Brain. It's a hard one to sort of pick to pieces, that.
Yeah, it's just a very, like you say, there's nothing else like it. It's just a weird movie overall.
It's worth talking about. I feel like this episode's going to be shorter than some of the others, but it's kind of a weird sort of, it's head trip, kind of psychoanalyzed. Yeah.
You need to go and see it for yourself, really, I think.
Yeah, you must see it for yourself. Unfortunately, this one is not available for you to watch on archive.org. You've got to go buy this.
You've got to spend like £1 on the DVD.
You've got to pay £1 for postage on Amazon probably to go get it. So we hope you enjoyed that. We're going to be back, I think, with Rat's Night of Terror or The Other Zombie 3.
The Other Zombie 3, yes.
Yeah. Whatever comes next, I hope you enjoy it. Goodbye.
Take it easy.
Support your 7th or 8th favourite YouTube channel by buying crap, tat, junk, hogwash and filth at redbubble.com/people/Val Verde Shop.